This is Main Street with Gary Allen. Now, here's Gary.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Main Street. Gary Allen with you, your humble host. And we have a great program for you today, so let's get to it. But first, I want to thank the Japanese Gardens of South Florida for their continued support of this particular program. Every once in a while, we come across someone that we really enjoy talking to. And last Friday night was my first time talking to my guest. And she called me. We talked for a little bit, and then we just talked before this program was on. But what a delight she is, and I know she will be for this program. My guest is an actress, a writer, a producer, founder and president of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, which was recently awarded the Agent of Change Award by the United Nations in New York. Her TV career is over. She's been part of over 25 miniseries on television, over 200 episodes as a guest star. She's made 35 movies for television. She's been in theater off and on her whole life. If we were to go through her entire career, it would take 3 hours. She also, her memoirs are called One for the Hart. I suggested it should be No Stone Unturned. And she also, at the age of 15 years old, danced for Jerome. For Jerome Robbins in New York. But she's also on the board of directors of 4 zoos in the United States. She is a philanthropist. She has a heart as big as the world, and she is the incomparable. And I mean incomparable, and I am so pleased to have her, Miss Stefanie Powers.
Oh, thank you, Gary. But let me just correct some of those little things.
Yeah.
At the age of 16, I was put under contract to Columbia Pictures, where I've made about 38 motion pictures, and then the rest was television and theater.
Yes.
But I did not work for Jerome Robbins in New York.
Oh, no.
No.
Well, it says on your resume here you did, so.
Oh, well, I don't know what those resumes say, and Wikipedia is never accurate.
Oh, no, I don't go by Wikipedia. I went to your bio, and I went to what I was sent and stuff like that. But here's some of the people you have worked with, so people have an idea. John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, Lana Turner, Ava Gardner, Cliff Robinson. I liked him. He was a pilot. Elliot Gould, Roger Moore, Mr. 007 himself. Although you were not a Bond girl, although you could have been, you're so beautiful. Donald Sutherland, Bing Crosby, Sammy Davis, Richard Chamberlain, which you did an independent Shakespeare thing called In 3 Days of Hamlet, which is fantastic. I love Shakespeare. And of course, what you're mostly noted for, I guess, by a lot of people besides theater and movies, is, of course, your series you did with Robert Wagner, Hart to Hart.
Thank you. Yes.
You have worked with a lot of interesting people.
I have indeed.
What was it at an early age that you said, show business is where I want to go?
Oh, well, it happened rather sort of swiftly. When I was a child, my mother gave me ballet lessons because I think she always said that prenatally she loved the ballet, and she used to attend all kinds of dance concerts and ballets, and so she thought that may have influenced me prenatally because. As a child, I was always dancing as an infant, toddler. I was always dancing around the house. So She decided to give me ballet lessons. And in that ballet class, because Hollywood in those days was a very, very tiny town, everybody sort of knew each other, or somehow people's paths crossed. And in this ballet class, because this was a wonderful teacher who had been with the Ballet Russe, Michel Panayev, and he was the place where you wanted to go to learn how to or have your children, your daughters, learn the grace and style of ballet. In that class, and I have a photograph in my little book that shows some of the girls that were in the class, and there they are, Natalie Wood, Jill St. John, and me. And it's a very funny photograph. looks as if it's almost impossible and impossibly coincidental, but indeed it probably wasn't coincidental that we were all in his class because that was the class you wanted your daughters to be in. So, as the city was a very tiny sort of industry town, it wasn't uncommon for people to grow up with those kinds of crossing of paths.
And isn't it interesting that all three of you have had Natalie Wood, of course, was married to RJ, but three of you have all had an interaction. I mean, Jill St.
Well,
John.
we were all married to him. I was married to him on television,
Yeah.
and Jill is married to him now, and Natalie was his wife twice.
Yes, and he's a handsome fellow, so much so that I'm so jealous of him. I'm so jealous of him. You talked as we opened the program up about you were signed under contract to Columbia Pictures. Part of this, I guess, the studio system back in the day. It was the tail end of that, correct? In that,
Yes, I think you could probably say that it was the twilight of the studio system, because in 1948 it was the federal government deemed that the motion picture industry was a monopoly because they made the films, they distributed the films, and they exhibited the films. It's sort of like Apple today.
yeah,
Amazon, Apple, all of that. They make the product, they distribute the product, and they exhibit. So anyway, the nobody nobody calls Apple a monopoly, or Microsoft, or any of those, which I think is insane. But the movie
yeah,
industry was broken up because it was considered a monopoly. So the first thing that the film industry did in mass was to sell off their cinemas, their chains of cinemas all over the country. It took a little bit longer for them to break up the studios.
hmm
And in this twilight period, the great stable of actors who were under contract to the individual studios was vastly reduced. I mean, it was almost reduced down to the cheapest ones to put under contract, who were the young ones, and I was one of those. So
okay.
they paid me $400 a week, and that was it.
Yeah,
And
400 bucks a week is not a bad pay even back then. I mean, even then, maybe even now, some people don't make $400 a week. But I mean, the studio system was the type. If I'm told correctly and remember, I don't remember, but I'm told that they would teach you how to sing and dance and how to walk, how to wear makeup correctly, how to do this, how to do that. They kind of refined you in a
But it
sense.
was a good, you could say that it was a sort of finishing school. Um, I didn't have to be taught how to dance or sing or behave or know which fork to use,
Yeah.
because I came from a rather European family and spoke Polish before I spoke English. And by the time I was in my teens, I spoke 3 or 4 languages. My grandmother spoke 14 languages, so I was a bit of a piker.
Wow.
In any event, what was available to us and what the studio system did to its young performers is
hmm
that it groomed them. I think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
They groomed them to rise to the occasion of the stars whose contracts they owned and who were bankable for movies, or they could loan them out to other studios and make a great deal more money than the actors cost them.
Yes.
And that's kind of what the studio system was like.
Yes, and of course it was when it was all broken up, and the actors themselves who were successful, like a John Wayne or a Maureen O'Hara or William Holden. It was great for them because they were already established and they could kind of come and go where they wanted because they had managers and agents and they were
Well,
still working. But for you young folks, it was a little bit different.
I mean, I think young actors would have appreciated today, would certainly have appreciated all the things that were available to them at the studios, and what you learned um, from just walking around the studio. I mean, we were encouraged to go to the camera department to learn about lenses and know exactly what the camera is seeing, so you understood what the camera, what was the parameter of your close-up.
Right, right. Because I think a lot of people think that actors just get in front of the camera, read their lines, and hit the mark, and boom. It's not that way. There is a technique to acting beyond memorizing the lines and showing up and hitting the mark. There's a technique of where to stand, where to look. When you're trying to talk to somebody, you usually look over someone's shoulder so the camera can get it like you are actually looking at each other. I mean, there are a dozen different techniques that have to go on as actors for depending upon what role you're doing and where you are. That takes time to learn. You just don't learn it overnight, and there needs to be a place where you can kind of learn and cut your teeth, as it were.
Yeah, more or less. Yes, that was pretty. Yes, it's a little more complicated than that, but it was. There is a technique to film act as there is a technique to theater, to the stage.
Yes, which brings up a question. When you're doing a film or a TV show, as you have over the years, or even a theater production, can you tell if an actor you're working with has a minimal, a major, or minor? Uh, well, minimal and minor would be the same, but a major eh, experience in theater.
You mean the fundamentals of acting?
Yeah, when they get in front of the camera and everything, or if they're on stage, can you tell if this person is an experienced theater trained performer or not?
I think you can. Yes, yes.
Yeah. Who do you prefer to work with the well-trained actors, or is it nice to sometimes get someone who's a newbie and you can kind of help mold them along and teach them and because I know you're very much involved with so much stuff that teaching, I have a feeling, is comes natural to you.
Teaching is only possible if the person wants to learn, and most of the young ones are not that keen.
Yeah.
They've got their agenda, and that's what they want to do. I
Yes, I
much
have a friend. Yes. Go ahead.
I much rather work with people, um, you know, seasoned performers, as I said, because it's like playing tennis. You want somebody to hit the ball back to you. You don't want
Yes.
somebody not to be there for you, and
Yes.
give you as much of a, or at least close to facsimilizing the performance off camera for your benefit when the camera's on you, that they did when the camera was on them.
Yes, exactly. And we're going to talk in a few minutes here about some of the people you worked with, but if there is one actor or actress, current, past, um, past in that they're no longer with us, or an actor that you worked with in the past, is there someone that you would love to have had an opportunity to work with in your life,
Well, I'd
actor,
love to have
actress?
worked with Bill. I'd love to have worked with Bill Holden. There was a moment where he was doing something for television, which was I think a two-parter or something like that. It was about a policeman, and there was a moment when I was in the last. It was between a couple of people and myself, and I always regret that we never worked together.
Oh, how did you meet Mr. Holden?
Oh, I met him several times before I really met him. So it's in the
Well,
book.
well, okay. All right. Which, by the way, I still say the title of your memoirs in the future should be No Stone Unturned, because there's literally nothing going on. You worked with John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara, and you and I talked about Maureen O'Hara on the phone on Friday, and I had heard from many people and seen some interviews with her years ago. She was one hell of a lady.
Oh, she was fabulous. She was, and divine. I mean, she was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And she had a beautiful voice. Did you know that Maureen sang?
No, I
And
didn't.
yes, she did. She made some records as well. But she had a beautiful voice. And of course, when you think about the fact that when she did How Green Was My Valley, I think she was 18 years old or something like that.
Wow.
She
She
started
she
very, very young.
Yes, she was incredible. I know that there was a stuntman on a set talking about her, that she prided herself on doing their own stunts when possible.
Well,
Uh,
she did a lot of her own stunts, but not the ones that were dangerous. However, if you look at the Quiet Man,
yeah,
uh, there was a cute story that Maureen told me that I said, how did you this in The Quiet Man, they have an argument, and John Wayne drags her across the Irish countryside and falling and rolling. And I said, how did you manage that? Did you choreograph it? And she said, oh no, John Ford did not want us to even rehearse it. So on the set, they would go behind the scenes and they would sort of try and rehearse certain moves or talk to the stunt people and say, what can I do? Because John Ford was absolutely against them doing any kind of rehearsals for that amazing a sequence in the picture.
You were in West Side Story. You told me that story the other night for a
Well, I
brief
started
while.
to I was very young at the time, and my role was certainly not germane to the movie. It was one of the Jet girls,
Yeah.
Velma. But I rehearsed with all of them. I went to, in order to, actually even qualify, I went to 16 dance auditions and screen tested 3 times before I was invited to come and start rehearsals. My mother had to be on the set. I had to have a teacher there. It was very restrictive because I was a minor and I was the only minor on the movie. So we
Yeah.
rehearsed for a couple of months. And finally, I was asked to leave because it was ridiculous. I mean, I shouldn't have been hired, but I was thrilled. And to this very day, I am thrilled that I had that opportunity because what an education it was. Jerome
Mm.
Robbins had gone to the Actors Studio and
Yeah.
he very much had motivational dance. You didn't snap your fingers unless you knew why.
Yeah.
And he would stop us in the middle of an entire dance number and say, because the Jets were the Anglo gang and the Sharks were the Puerto Ricans. So he'd stop us in the middle of rehearsals and he'd walk over to somebody and say, why do you hate the Puerto Ricans? And you would have to have an entire story about your background and your character and all. Well, I had never been exposed to that. And it was sort of Stanislavski dancing. And
Yeah.
what a fabulous experience that was.
I've always believed as a young actor when I was in LA, even when I was with the Groundlings, that any experience, good, bad, or indifferent, was wonderful because you take that with you. You make a mental note of it. Yes, that works. No, that doesn't work. And I remember doing Saint Elsewhere, and I went on one show here and one show there, and I had a scene opposite William Daniels, who was in my favorite musical, 1776. And I love that thing. It's a little off what history was, but nevertheless. And I remember walking out with him that night when we were finished. And I said, Mr. Daniels, I've come on this set. Even when I wasn't supposed to be here, they let me come on this set because I want to watch you. I wanted to watch the cast, but I learned more from you in a short period of time than I ever have from any of my acting teachers. And this is the funniest thing in the world. He looked at me and he said, well, of course you did, young man. You're learning from the best.
He was he's still alive.
Yes, he's still very much alive, and he's a
Very much.
wonderful, wonderful man. He really is. Which brings me to, what did you learn from John and Marina and Lana and Ava and Cliff and all the others? Because actors learn from each other, and we're not so staid in what we do that we're so big that we can't learn something. What did you learn from some of these wonderful people you worked with?
Oh my gosh, I don't know how to synopsize it, but um,
A
they were
couple of
all
things.
such wonderful professionals that they gave to you in a scene. That was
Hmm.
the one thing that I guess I learned from osmosis because they were so professional and they respected the other actors in the piece sufficiently to want to connect and to try and connect and make sure that if there was anything that wasn't working, that they could work it out with you.
Yeah.
It was a different kind of education, and different manners, and
Hmm.
I learned a lot from all of them.
I know that my buddy wanted me to ask you because he's a big James Bond fan, although you were not in a Bond movie that I'm well aware of. Although you could have been. I mean, you're as beautiful as any Bond girl I ever saw. What was Roger Moore like? I always liked Roger because I thought he had a great sense of humor.
He did. He absolutely did. He loved telling dirty jokes. I mean, that was his thing. I've got a joke. He was we excuse me.
If you want to take
Because
some
of
water, go ahead. If you
no,
have
no,
some
I've
water.
got a pine tree that is spewing out all its pollen at this time of year, and it's
Ah.
chokes me up and chokes the dogs up. Everybody's got some issue with this pollen that comes out
Let
at
me
this.
remind everybody that you're on. Stefanie Powers is my guest on Main Street. Gary Allen with you, and I'm so pleased to have her with us. And she's talking about Roger Moore, her time with him on set.
Well, in life, actually, because we became very friendly as a result of that movie, and I knew his kids growing up because they were babies. They were very young at the time, and we remained very close as friends until
Yeah,
his death,
yeah.
unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, well, almost all the Bond guys are gone now, except for Piers and a few others and of course, Craig, who's currently been doing this. But what I want to do is, Tommy, let's put up a couple of pictures, and then we're going to get to the William Holden Wildlife Foundation because that's what you're here for, and I want to dedicate a whole half hour to that. Tommy, put up a couple of the pictures that we have from. Yeah, there he is. What was it like working with the Duke? And by the way, one of my favorite scenes in that whole movie is when he shoots his own son with the pistol when he supposedly impugned your character.
Impugned my honor. He
Your
impugned
honor. There you go.
honor.
Yes.
uh, oh God, I don't know what to say. What was it like? It was just a joy. He was. I mean, if you were a kid growing up watching all those wonderful, fabulous Western movies, I loved The Searchers. Oh my God, that was my favorite movie. Uh,
Yes.
who would you want to do a Western movie with? John
Either
Wayne.
John Wayne or Robert Mitchum, one or the other.
Well, John Wayne in particular, he was the
Yeah.
personification of
All right.
Western.
Can we have another one, please?
Ah,
There you are. There you are. And
the
you're as
gang,
beautiful. Yeah, RJ. And I forget the gentleman's name who's standing in front of you.
Lionel Sander.
Yes. What a show that was. I mean, that was my mother loved that show. My mother loved that show. As a matter of fact, my mother said the first time she saw you when they released McClintock on television, although I think she saw it in movie theaters, but many years earlier, because they were holding back Jack, a couple of movies for years. She said, "Oh my God, she's even more beautiful now than she was in McClintock." And I said,
My
"Yeah,
God.
she's a beautiful lady, you know." But I envied you because you got to drive my favorite Mercedes. There you are with the man. And talk about him as an actor and as a man, if you could be so kind. Not your relationship maybe so much, but just as the man, William Holden, because that'll also transition us right into in 1959. He took, I guess, a vacation to Kenya, and that's where this all kind of got started.
No, 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 no. Bill was living in Switzerland at the time. This is in the mid 50s, not in 1959.
Okay.
First went to Kenya in, I think it was 1956,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
with two friends as a hunter. And in those days, the herds of animals were prolific. And there was not much going on because, and certainly we have to put this in perspective, mass tourism didn't start in the United States, mass tourism, moving to countries that we would have considered to be exotic, such as East Africa, until way late in the 1970s. Most
Mhm.
Americans didn't even have a passport. So putting it in perspective, Kenya was in the midst of its battle for independence. They received their independence in 1963, but the Mau Mau, who were the tribe of Kikuyus that were fighting for independence, were all over the mountains in the north. And so no one was traveling up to these northern areas which were in many cases the hunting areas, the hunting blocks, which were
Yeah.
numbered blocks, which were controlled by the game department. So these three intrepid travelers decided to go anyway and go after the big five, which was elephant, rhino, lion, leopard, and buffalo. In those days, they were the trophy animals. And as I said, this was way before anybody was concerned about their decreasing numbers. Bill had some kind of a vision about how their numbers might increase. He fell in love with Kenya on that trip. And what happened between the three of them, because they had to be there for a couple of months in order to complete the trophy animals that they had wanted to, they went there for. And so in that period of time, the camp would have to move from place to place, and they would retire at a local watering hole, which in this case was an upcountry inn, which was for sale. And guess what happened? So they all bought this place and they took it into the Mount Kenya Safari Club, which became a kind of jewel in the crown for travelers to East Africa. Beautiful on the slopes of Mount Kenya. And it was only a few years after that that the 2,000 acres that surrounded the Safari Club that belonged to a farmer, a Major Nicholson, he was kind of getting to a point where he was thinking that he might sell, and Bill convinced him to sell it to him. And Bill bought the 2,000 acres and created the first ever game ranch for the preservation of species in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, possibly in the whole of Africa. And that was 1959. So that is the 1959 date.
Okay.
When nobody had the word conservation in their vocabulary, let alone the concept of extinction. So early on, he was a visionary. And early on, he appreciated the extraordinary flora and fauna that needed to be preserved. We had decimated, in the United States, we had decimated our own natural species, the buffalo, the American wild horse. So he found an opportunity to actually influence the possibility of preservation.
Tommy, put that website up there, would you please, for me? I want that to run as long as we're on the air. The William Holden. There you go. If you folks want more information about the William Holden Wildlife Foundation.org, go on there. It's a website. It has everything going on. It even has a gift shop. And around Christmas time, perfect time for you to buy figurines and jewelry and things of that nature, and to help the preserve, to help the foundation, because 100% of all of this, I guess, Stefanie, you told me the other day, goes to the foundation and goes to the education center that's there.
It's a 501c3 public charity, which means that all donations are tax deductible. And unlike a lot of charities, and I'm not going to mention which ones, I can absolutely attest to the fact that 100% of every donation, which I consider a sacred trust that people have given me, that I'm going to take their hard-earned cash and actually put it toward 100% of it toward what they've given it for. Nothing goes in overheads. So I know, because I pay the overheads. So I can absolutely tell everybody, all of your listeners and all of your viewers, that everything they give me, 100%, goes toward the projects that they are funding.
Absolutely.
We have our education center, which is what Bill always wanted to build, but didn't live to see it, in order to back up the ongoing preservation of 37 species of East African wildlife that was ongoing on the game ranch. This was the education component. So the mission statement of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation, which I founded after Bill's death, in order to create a kind of living memorial to him, The mission statement is wildlife conservation through education and alternatives to habitat destruction. We have 11,000 students a year that
Wow.
come to us and have come to us since 1982, since we got our IRS status
Mm-hmm.
as a public charity. And we have an outreach program that copes with another about 6,000 people in very rural and extremely impoverished communities.
Yes. Well, I'm so impressed. And by the way, when you were telling that story about him buying the hotel and or the there and everything, I can just imagine the persuasion that William Holden had over people because he was a fine actor. I mean, I loved him in so many different things that he did, and I can imagine what it was like for you with him. It had to be. He had a great smile. I mean, one of the best smiles. And the man, and what I'm envious about too, he looked great in a suit. Oh my God, he looked so great in a suit. I was so envious of it. But I mean, I know we lost him in I believe it's 1981, I
Well,
believe he passed away. And I was only in Hollywood. I was thinking about this the other night. I was living there at that time, but I didn't obviously travel in the same circles. But what a loss as a man, as a humanitarian that he was. I know he's sitting on a cloud somewhere and he's just kicking his legs every year for you when what you do and how you do it. I watched a program last night and they were talking about Kenya. Kenya gets a lot of rain and it's agricultural aspects of it are very rich. Am I getting that program correct from what they said?
well, I don't know what they said. So we have two rainy seasons, but we're also prone to a lot of drought.
Oh,
Um, when those drought seasons happen, the land becomes extremely hard, so that when there are some unseasonal heavy rains, there can be disastrous flooding that
yeah,
occurs. And I think that's maybe what you might be talking about, because there were some rather damaging floods this year.
yeah. Um, some of the programs that you do there and some of the projects, and by the way, please donate. That's the one thing that they need, probably more than anything else besides volunteers, is donations to help this move forward. You know, folks, we have taken apart this world that we live in. We have destroyed the United States as far as, and Stephanie mentioned it, some of the animals that we have here and the fauna and the floral and the flowers and the plants and the trees. We've destroyed our rainforests. We've destroyed everything with our greed. And it's time we start thinking about this earth for the next 2, 3, 4 generations because it's going to hell in a handbag. So please get on there on the William Holden Wildlife Foundation.org. Donate. There's a drop down window that tells you the different ways you can donate. And as you said, it's tax deductible. Let's talk about some of the programs you have the agricultural EC project. Talk about that a little bit.
Oh, agroec, yes.
Yeah.
Because we're all aware that climate change is a fact of life, that overexploitation around the world has altered dramatically all of the patterns of weather that we relied on for thousands of years. Now we're having to remake the wheel. We have to start from the beginning. If you imagine that it takes about 1,000 years to create 1 inch of topsoil.
Wow.
That's an astonishing fact, isn't it?
Wow.
So
Yes.
we now are responsible for having to now find ways to recreate what God gave us, or what the natural world gave us on this extraordinary planet that we are fortunate enough to inhabit. And as we know, there's nothing in our solar system that matches this planet.
Yeah.
It is what Buckminster Fuller used to call the spaceship planet Earth. We are careening through space on this very fragile spaceship, it is now our responsibility to recreate the kind of climate that was afforded us by virtue of the natural world that existed, that we have now screwed up. I mean,
Mm,
it's not just screwing it up, it's this over exploitation, which is of such massive scale, that the planet can't even recover for itself.
No.
We have to recover for it. We have
Yeah.
to come up with new ways of agriculture that are not going to leave the ground open so that more carbon is escaping because the ground is uncovered. We're
Yeah.
not going to exploit natural green belt areas, which after exploitation wind up becoming deserts.
Hmm.
The Sahara Desert has encroached unbelievably in areas
Mhm.
which will never recover because once topsoil is gone, you have sand.
Yeah.
In order to recreate the topsoil on that sand takes massive amounts of, of material that's not readily available to those areas. So the
Yeah.
precious land that we do have and the subsistence farming that's gone on in the third world all over this planet has relied on chemicals. Those chemicals are poisonous. Yes, they produced extraordinary amounts of food, but now we're paying the price because cancer has resulted from a great deal of that food that's been
Yeah.
grown on poisonous chemicals.
Yeah.
When
Absolutely.
we in the United States decided that to outlaw the use of DDT, we did not outlaw the production of it. And we gave it away to places like our neighbors in Mexico as aid. Now we're re-importing produce from Mexico that was grown on land that may have been contaminated with DDT, which has
Yeah.
a half-life of 1,000 years. But
Exactly. Let's.
we have soiled our own habitat,
Yeah. We
and
have. We have.
now it's
And
our job to clean it up.
you're watching Main Street. Stefanie Powers is my guest. She's the president and founder of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation in Africa. That's www.hwf.org. Please go on the website. Please take a look at everything going on there and donate. Donate, donate, donate. I told Stephanie this on Friday night. And I'm going to say it right here so I can't take it back. This platform will always be open to you anytime you want it when you come back from Kenya or anytime something you want to talk about, you can always come on here.
Thank
Let's see some pictures, Tommy. Some more pictures of Africa, please. There you go. There's the symbol for it. I think it's a beautiful symbol. And there you are, smiling as always. Next,
you.
please. And is this is our these are Kenyans, correct?
Yes, those are Samburu.
Uh-huh.
And that car was the capture car. So what the game ranch used to do was to capture animals that might be endangered or that were in peril for because human development was encroaching on their habitat, and they would come back to the game ranch, and they would sometimes be exported to zoos and zoological parks all over the world for gene pool refreshing and for unfortunately becoming some of the last vestiges of those species
Yeah.
for people to learn from and see what is now extinct in the wild. 5 of the species and the symbol in that logo, those animals are called bongo, East African bongo. It's not a drum.
Ah,
It's an antelope.
yes.
They are pretty much extinct in the wild, and the game ranch was responsible for creating one of the largest efforts to rehabilitate that species and to breed that species so that it can be released once again onto Mount Kenya, which was its habitat and where it is now extinct.
Are zoos our last hope?
Yes,
Our zoos
captive
are
breeding is definitely, yes, unfortunately, in many cases, yes, or well-managed national parks.
yes, absolutely. Another picture, please. Ah, there he is. The man who you never want to invite for dinner because you could be at the dinner. And that's the lion. That's a beautiful picture.
Those are juveniles, those are two young males. When they get to be completely full grown, the tips of their manes will be black.
Ah. Now, the vehicle behind you, is that oh, here we are. This was, I thought, interesting. I see you, but who's the woman in front of you?
That is the former First Lady of Kenya. That is Margaret Kenyatta, whose husband was a two-term president, Uhuru Kenyatta, who was the son of the first president of Kenya, who was called Mzee Kenyatta, who was, excuse me,
That's all right.
who fostered the new burgeoning country. So his son became president all these years later, and she was a patron of the anniversary, the 35th anniversary of the opening of the education center.
Speaking of which, how important has it been for the education of the locals and the education for the human beings of the world, for your educational center there in Kenya to teach the younger generation coming up what to do with the land, what to do farming and treating the animals? How important is the educational center and what goes on there for future generations?
Oh my goodness. Well, it is an education center. So we offer courses in all sorts of avenues of conservation, but mainly it's to introduce people to what biodiversity is, what it means, how it affects your life, and why it is important to preserve and protect the whole biosphere of the large animals as well as down to the birds and the bees,
Hmm.
and what roles they play in the food chain that is so crucial to our survival.
Yeah. I mean,
So that is the main reason that education is so important to local people, to be able to understand why in the world they should even bother to try and preserve these animals.
and this beautiful animal, and of course you're standing next to it.
Is a
Uh,
bongo. That's a
that
bongo.
that's a bongo. Beautiful animal. I mean,
Or-
absolutely beautiful. It really is. I
yeah.
remember my niece for one of her birthdays wanted a zebra for a pet. Now that's not logical. So
Not
my
a good
brother
pet.
said,
Not a good pet. They bite and they kick.
yes, and my brother said, "What can I do, Gary?" I said, "Get her a stuffed zebra. I mean, you can't legally own a zebra for God's sakes." He said, "What
I
if
think
I?"
you can, but I wouldn't recommend it.
No, no, any more than I would with some of the animals that Tippi Hedren has had, the cats. I mean, they're real cute when they're little babies, but like anything else, they grow up eventually. Talk about the sponsorship program that you have there at the Wildlife Center, and how people can get involved in the sponsorship of some of the different programs you have there.
Well, we started spreading the word in our rural outreach program. First thing we did was I used to ride my horses up on on Mount Kenya, and I came across a village up on the mountain. This is a long, long time ago. Who where there was a school, and there were about 400 kids in this school with only 14 teachers. And they were working in the forestry department, sort of cutting trees and planting around seedlings, replanting seedling trees. And they were really on the front lines of the human animal conflict. And I thought, my goodness, this was the beginning of the outreach program. We're missing the whole boat here. We've got people coming to our education center, but we need to go on and reach out to these rural communities who need to understand how we can cohabit.
Yeah.
So we started by building our first library attached to this tiny rural school up on the slopes of the mountain. And suddenly it spawned a greater interest. The results were enormous. We had all kinds of kids who had never even seen a map of the world, who were
Really.
suddenly opening up their minds to the possibilities of a different kind of lifestyle, and a
Wow.
lifestyle where where the world was more in focus, and the world outside their little patch became part of their future. So that led us to start to look for more opportunities to do the same thing, which we did. We
Yeah.
have 7 rural schools that we've completely restructured and rebuilt, and part of that also was to encourage education, because scholarship, because through education we learn everything, obviously, but you have to have the education to be able to absorb the lessons. So
Yeah.
that was going to be the method by which we would preach the gospel of conservation, if you like, to a mass of people who would otherwise never become in touch with this kind of information. So
Yeah. Yeah.
along with that, we began to also, we realize that the future of wildlife, the future of the entire planet is in the hands of human beings.
Yeah.
We're the only damaging creature. We're the
Yeah.
only ones who do not contribute to the food chain. We are the exploiters. We are the ultimate opportunists. We are the villains in this scenario.
We are the takers and we're not the givers.
We are. We are indeed, and we need to be the ones who amend our ways and find alternatives to the abuse that we're giving this poor planet. So that's part of the reason that we started to have a sponsorship program to highlight some of the exceptional students who were too poor to be able to continue their education. Uh,
Hmm.
Primary education is free, but secondary education is not. So that
Hmm.
would be high school level, and that would lead on to either a potential for higher education in some way, or a trade school, which is the thing that's really most desirable, because it teaches them how to get a job in
Yeah.
doing something practical. And we've been able, our sponsors, these wonderful donors of ours, who have we've found exceptional people, exceptional students for them to sponsor. They've fallen in love with the students, and so some of them have already graduated from teachers training school. Some
Oh,
of them
wow.
are in teachers training school. One of them is in taking her last tests to become a CPA. So we have
Wow.
wonderful stories about these exceptional kids who would otherwise have never had an opportunity to rise above some rather impoverished circumstances.
Isn't it wonderful when you see the light bulb go on in a young person's head and see how they're moving in a wonderfully positive direction? Isn't it so gratifying,
It's,
amongst everything you're doing with the animals as well? I mean, it's got to warm your heart to no end, Stephanie Powers. I mean, you're an angel. You are a true angel in every sense of the
well,
word. I
our
have a
donors
brother who,
are our donors are the angels, because if it weren't for them, we couldn't
yeah,
do anything. And
yeah,
their generosity is what keeps us going. Their
yeah,
generosity is what spurns us and gives all of our staff in Africa, it gives them the enthusiasm to carry on.
yeah.
And me.
And yes, well, I mean, and aren't you? I mean, I believe Harlan told me you're about to leave for Kenya again real soon in the next week or so.
No, no, I'll be leaving in the beginning of the year.
Oh, okay. All right. Because Harlan said, Gary, let's get her before she leaves for Kenya. And I went, oh, okay, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. How long did it take you to manage to get past the language barrier? I mean, obviously, you must have learned the local language in order to communicate with those who don't speak English. How long did
Well,
it take you?
there's a trade line which is was established in just in East Africa, sort of Kenya, Tanzania, a little bit around the edge of Lake Victoria, and it's called Kiswahili.
Hmm.
It's only spoken in East Africa, not in West Africa, and it's a lingua franca, so it combines a lot of the sort of expressions that come from Arabic, because if you look at the map and you see that the traders used to come down from Yemen and Oman to trade on the east coast of Africa. So that influence created this trade language. And when the early explorers went into the interior, they needed to be able to speak something. And so
Yeah.
slowly, Kiswahili began to take over because
Yeah.
we have 37 tribes and they all speak a different language.
Yes.
So parliament is conducted in Kiswahili in Kenya. In school, Kiswahili and English are taught.
Mhm.
But everybody is multilingual because they speak tribal languages. I don't
Let's
speak.
talk.
I know a few phrases in Kikuyu, but I speak enough Kiswahili to be understood.
We've got about 5 minutes left of the program. Talk to the American people that are going to be watching this program and on DBTV in a couple of weeks about why they should donate to the William Holden Wildlife Foundation.
You want me to tell them why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, if they go to our website, they'll see exactly where the money goes, and they will understand the impact that it has. We are not one of these mega organizations. We have a very good budget. We have no overheads, so we don't have to lose money that way. And what we are able to accomplish specifically with smaller amounts of funds is absolutely astonishing. I can't tell you absolutely every single detail in the amount of time that we have. So all I can hope is that people will go to whwf.org, look at our website, find something that interests them, and become a member. We need
Yes.
more members, and we'd love to have you, whoever you are that's listening.
And it's whwf.org. And please give and give generously. There's a gift shop on there. Christmas time is around the corner. And please, the figurines are beautiful oh, sounds like somebody else wants to join the show.
I have 5 dogs, and there's one that was allowed in. The others are
Okay.
outside barking. You can't hear them, but they're all complaining because they want to be in here.
Stefanie, in the few minutes that we have left, you're incredible. You're absolutely incredible. And I made a promise to you, and I'm going to keep that promise. Anytime, anywhere, I got to have you back. You just call Harlan. Harlan will call me, and we'll set it up to have you back. But
Well,
I
I
want
appreciate that, Andy.
to. Well, I'm gonna do what I can. Gary always keeps his word. I always keep my word.
Oh, yes, Gary. Yes.
Yes. Looking back on your life and where you are now, and you think about your career, you think about the foundation, you think about everything that's gone on in your life. For people who don't know who Stefanie Powers is, who is Stefanie Powers?
Who? You're asking me who she
Mm-hmm.
is?
Yeah,
I don't
who
know.
are you?
Who is she? I don't know. All of that, all the above.
Really? I mean, is that little girl from 15 years old still there?
I don't know if I want her to be there, but she probably is.
Yeah. And finally, what's the future for the Wildlife Foundation? Where do you want to take it? Where do you want to go?
Well, I think what we're doing now with with the AgroEc project, which is soil regeneration and the teaching of a new form of agriculture to accommodate the regenerative aspect of the soil that we're able to turn over in one growing season. That's our focus now. We have appeals out to a number of universities within the United States: USC, Stanford, University of California at Davis. We've talked to people at in England at Cambridge. I've spoken with people at University of Michigan, so that we are offering opportunities for PhD candidates as well as master's degree candidates to come out and do their studies for their thesis on
Mm-hmm.
regenerative agriculture or regenerative soil, on our protocols for the regeneration of soils.
Okay.
We have a
That
way
sounds great.
of amalgamating a number of techniques that have proven extremely successful for us. We have, in the last 3 years, been doing 7 projects of regenerative soils, which then also have combined with the permaculture approach to agriculture that combines it all together in one package. And we've been able to afford an opportunity for people to grow enough food in a very short span of time that allows them to not only subsist on the food they're growing, but to have a cash crop to sell. So that's been very successful in the 7 projects that we have.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. She is Stefanie Powers, the founder and president of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation.org. Get on there, donate, buy, support this wonderful organization. And Stefanie, I just want to thank you so much. Please stay there right after the show. I want to talk to you for just a couple of minutes afterwards. And I just want to say to all of you out there.
Thank you very much, Gary, for all the plugging.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. To all of you out there, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Next week is the Christmas show. I won't be here. I'm leaving town. I'm going somewhere. But Dave Lamont and Defoe will hold down the fort along with Tommy. So until then, take care of yourselves. Happy holidays. God bless. Until next time.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much.
Oh, you're more than welcome, Stefanie. And listen.